Hi everyone, welcome back to Lifting the Lamp. This is my second video talking about the work that we must do after attaining knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, because there's more that you're supposed to do with that experience once you've had it. Now this is a very advanced level of esotericism. It presumes that somebody has attained knowledge and conversation. I've done some other more preliminary videos on knowledge and conversation. If you're only just coming to this, I'll link those in the description below. And in my first video, I spoke about how once we have had the mystical experience of knowledge and conversation with the Holy Guardian Angel, the very first thing we need to do is make sure that we are able to recollect the state of consciousness that the angel represents by doing a regular practice where we become present in the angel and feel what that feels like again, and experience life from that divine perspective again. So we're creating more and more space in our life where the angel can exert its influence. And the very first stage in that is, of course, enthroning the divine aspects of our being, which is what the angel really represents, and making that the center, establishing that as the center, and then doing all we can to order the rest of our life around that center. So we've decided that our inner divine nature is going to be the focus, not the ego, not the monkey mind, not the physical body consciousness, which at its root is divinity. We've made the decision that we're going to live from that perspective, and we're going to identify with that part of us. And we've taken steps to habitually evoke the feeling of being that, so that we can become familiar with being that more and more. Because of course, what our awareness focuses on throughout the day, throughout our life, will change constantly. But we're trying to bring our awareness back to itself as much as possible. But the other thing that will become noticeable at this point in the path is that we'll start to form the nucleus of a new kind of personality, because we have many different personalities. We have the work personality, we've got the personality of different friend groups, we've got the family personality. We don't have a singular, coherent individual identity. We've got many identities, which is something I've spoken about before, and it's even more relevant here. And now, as we start to accumulate more and more experience of the angel, of being the angel, experiencing life from the perspective of the angel, of having experiences where we go into the state of consciousness of the angel, a new kind of personality will start to form around that. And as we, to varying degrees of success, carry that out into the world with us, and maybe see things a bit differently when we've just been in that zone or done that practice, this new personality will start to form around our identity with divinity, our identity with the angel. And that personality will need to compete with all of the other personalities that are of the world. They will try and overwhelm it. They will try and overwhelm the consciousness and put it back in its box so that we can stay asleep. Our ego impulses, our thoughts don't want us to wake up, because then they're not in control anymore. If the consciousness is in control, our mind, our ego, is no longer in the driver's seat. So we have to be ready for that battle. And there's a bunch of things that we need to do to reduce the noise and really start to bring all of the other parts of our being, all the other little personalities that we have, into orbit around the angel, around the sense of personality that we have formed that is related to our identity with divinity, and start to order and structure our consciousness around that experience. And that's not to say that we go into our identity with divinity and then impose our will on the rest of our mind and try and use force, because that's not going to solve the problem. But we can just gently reorder our life. We can gently give a new purpose to all of the other impulses, thoughts, aspirations that we have, and we can very delicately question them all to see whether they are really serving an end that is worthwhile. And during this process, as we observe the other parts of us, we will discover that there are things that we no longer want to identify with, that we want to renounce, so to speak. And there are other things in us which are quite healthy parts of our being, very valid expressions of our being, but perhaps when that part of us is expressed in an egotistical way, we don't get the result that we want. So perhaps the consciousness, working through our sense of identity that we've built up around divinity, can give a new job to those parts of us that are sabotaging us, that is more constructive to our overall life. And perhaps we can recognize the contradictions in our thoughts, in our beliefs, and start to iron all of that out. As we live more and more from the consciousness, as we live more and more from divinity, and are able to look at all of the other parts of our inner world objectively. So I've spoken about the system of the AA before, the Argentium Astrum, probably the main esoteric order that incorporates knowledge and conversation with the holy guardian angel in today's times. It used to be a feature of the Golden Dawn, and the Golden Dawn is still around in some form, but beyond the grade of Adeptus Minor, the Golden Dawn has traditionally not said much. The AA has really fleshed out the tasks of the grades towards the top of the tree a lot better, including what happens after knowledge and conversation, although one must admit the information on what those tasks actually are is still pretty sketchy. The grade where in the AA where you attain knowledge and conversation is the grade of Adeptus Minor, the grade associated with the Kabbalistic sphere of Tiferet. And the grade directly above that is of the Adeptus Major, which is associated with the Kabbalistic sphere of Geburah, which is associated with the planet Mars, the god of war, the pillar of severity on the tree of life. And so the work of this grade, as the theme of its Sephira suggests, is being really ruthless and identifying the things in our life that are no longer serving us, and then getting rid of them, and building up our willpower and resilience and determination and tenacity, not to go to war with an external enemy, but to go to war with ourselves in a way, because we think that we're in control of our mind, and we think that our mind and our impulses are acting in our best interest, but they're not. When you try and control those parts of yourself, they resist. So this is the work of spiritual warfare that must occur here. Maybe not in a literal sense, but it is certainly a struggle to live a life where we are conscious enough, where we're not constantly sabotaged by our emotions, our thoughts, our instincts, all of the psychological baggage that we bring with us into life. It's a long, hard road to change all of that. But what are some of the tasks that we see at this point on the tree, at this point in the AA initiatory system? Well, one task is associated with this level of the tree is reading Liber 30, otherwise known as Liber Librae, the Book of Balances. And this is basically a book which comes down from the Golden Dawn, which is a book of moral instruction. How best to master our own nature by rejecting vice and instead living according to virtue. And this is very much in line with the kinds of changes that we need to start to make in our life if the light of the angel is going to be able to properly shine forth and exert its influence in our life. It's no use, otherwise it's like having a dirty window. If you've got a window that's covered in dirt, covered in grime, the light is never going to be able to shine through it. You need to clean the dirt away in order for the light to shine through. Another thing that gives us a little hint into what the work of the Adeptus Major might be is to consider the 4 great yogas identified by Swami Sivananda. These 4 great yogas are Raja Yoga, Bhakti Yoga, Jnana Yoga, and Karma Yoga. Of the 4, 3 of the yogas have already been assigned a place in the AA's initiatory system. Raja Yoga is attributed to the sphere of Tifereth because it's associated with the will, it's associated with the attainment of a spiritual state which is very similar to Samadhi, which of course is the goal of Raja Yoga. The practice of Jnana Yoga is attributed to the sphere of Hod, which is attributed in the AA grade system to the grade of Practicus, and this is a very intellectual grade, as the practice of Jnana Yoga is very intellectual. The practice of Bhakti Yoga is attributed to the sphere of Netzach, which corresponds to the grade of the philosophers, and this is all about the feelings of love and emotion and using those feelings as a tool to try and connect with something divine, which is very much the theme of Bhakti Yoga. As for the lowest 2 grades in the AA system, not counting student and probationer, the grades that actually appear on the tree, you've got neophyte and zealator, which correspond with asana and pranayama, respectively. These are kind of subsumed into Raja Yoga, so they still kind of form part of the scheme of the 4 great yogas. There's one missing, Karma Yoga. There's still been no place assigned for Karma Yoga in the AA initiatory system, as it's explained in the first 5 grades. So then where should this Karma Yoga be practiced? Well, it's not at the top of the tree in the supernal triad, because by that point we're supposed to have destroyed all of our karma. And it's certainly not in the beneficent and merciful sphere of Chesed in the Adeptus Exemptus degree. So that leaves the Adeptus Major degree in Gebura, which is very centered around severity, around cutting out that which no longer serves us, and having an exacting discipline in our life. And that is very much in keeping with the theme of Karma Yoga. Because Karma Yoga is all about changing our behavior so that we're renouncing the fruits of our actions and dedicating our entire life to the divine. And this forces us to come face to face with our ego and overcome all of the stories that the ego wants to tell us about how we should be living our life. And so we're taking the Philosopher's Stone, that is the angel, and the experience of knowledge and conversation, and slowly but surely we are using that tincture, that red tincture of the Philosopher's Stone, to transform the ordinary, dense lead of the mundane life we led before into the gold of the solar human being, which is what we're trying to transform ourselves into. And our connection with the angel is one of the things that is going to help us with that inner alchemy. It's not just about a state of consciousness. It's all well and good to reach this or that mystical state, but what does that actually mean in the real world? What long-lasting impact does that have? What is the point of that if it doesn't have any long-term consequence in terms of the way that it changes the rest of your life? And that really is the essence of this stage of the work following knowledge and conversation. It's basically the work of dissolving as much of the ego as we can. Ego as distinct from a sense of self that is not rooted in a sense of separation, selfishness, attachment, grasping after material things, etc. We're trying to instead build up a personality that is based in virtue. We're introducing virtue and we're rejecting the limiting egotistical kinds of habits that we had before. And we're introducing identity with the divine within us. If you do want to ascend all the way up the tree, back to the crown, the very crown of divinity, eventually you're going to have to cross the abyss. And what does crossing the abyss entail? It entails the complete dissolution of the ego. Now, there's two ways that this can happen. If your goal is to cross the abyss, you can try and dissolve the ego all at once and send yourself insane, quite literally. Or you can slowly, over many years, start to chip away, chisel away at your ego in a way that is manageable until you're left with very little of that egotistical nature when it does come time to cross the abyss. And really to sincerely do the work on oneself and sincerely try and dissolve the ego must be a gradual process, and it does take many years. There's only one other initiatory system that I know of besides the AA system which talks about crossing the abyss, and that is the three mountains of the Gnostic movement out of Latin America. And in the system of the three mountains, it's the second mountain, which is pretty much the work of crossing the abyss. And it's the work of that mountain is undertaken over many years. And the work of dissolving the ego begins even before that on the first mountain, which takes many years more. So it's a real slow burn getting rid of the ego. And some people don't want to get rid of the ego because the way that people often think about this in the spiritual community is like we're just erasing our personality and just becoming a blank slate, which is the wrong way of looking at it completely. We still have a personality once the ego is gone. It's just that it's a personality that's not distorted by grasping and attachment, etc. It's a personality which can be the vehicle of divinity, which was always in us, but didn't have an appropriate vehicle to express itself. And so what we're doing when we're dissolving the ego, working on karma, walking the path of justice and virtue, is we're just coming into our true nature. We're coming into what we were always meant to be. And part of what the angel is said to do when you finally do attain knowledge and conversation is tell you your true will. The thing that you're really meant to do in life, so that you can discard everything else that is not aligned with that true will and do only that. And a lot of people think about true will as just one thing that they're going to do for the rest of their life. But that's not necessarily the case. True will changes from time to time, And really, if you get deep down in terms of what it looks like to live a life where our individual will truly is in alignment with the will of the universe, it's essentially the same for everyone. And that might be a controversial statement, and it might take different forms, but essentially the true will of everybody is to understand and live from their divine nature and use the inner alchemy of self-transformation to create a life where we're better able to express that divine nature in the world around us. And that's what we're trying to do with the experience of knowledge and conversation once we have it, so that we don't squander that experience. So I hope that that's been helpful. I know this topic is quite advanced and quite heavy, but I hope you got something out of this video, no matter what stage you're at in your spiritual journey. I hope that it helped you in some way. Now, this is my opinion. I'm not claiming to be any kind of arbiter of absolute truth here, but I have studied this stuff quite extensively, and I have had quite a lot of experience, and I'm bringing that with me to give my views on what the work after knowledge and conversation is. And this video, my last video, is the culmination of that. So I hope you enjoyed it. Leave your comments down below if you have any. If you haven't subscribed already, please do hit that subscribe button. Thanks again for listening. I'll see you next time.